This is Pastor Gavin Whitcomb, Sr. from Moores Mountain Church. Welcome to Old Testament Survey. So this is the Boiling Point podcast and Pastor Gavin Productions. So we're going to be looking at the book of Deuteronomy now. Deuteronomy was written by Moses around 1400 BC, somewhere, not exactly, but as a general guideline here. So Deuteronomy contains a written account of Moses' final words that he spoke to the children of Israel before his death, as the Israelites camped at the border of the Promised Land, preparing to conquer it. So this is the new generation that was young during the wilderness wandering. So the old generation that come out of Egypt died off, except for Moses, and then you have Joshua and Caleb. So this is a new generation. So Moses wanted to fill them in and to give them an update on what had happened in the past and renew their covenant with God and just sort of charge them to go in and to possess the land that God had given them. Now, there are three different sections of the book of Deuteronomy. There's a historical section, a practical section, then a brief biographical section. So in chapters 1 through 11, Moses repeats Israel's history to this new generation. Then chapters 12 through 30, there's an explanation of God's laws. So there are various laws that God gave the children of Israel. And incidentally, Deuteronomy, it's my understanding that it's one of the most often quoted books in the New Testament. So then the final biographical section, it has the closing days of the life of Moses. So let's dig into the word here in Deuteronomy chapter 1. So it says that these are the words that Moses spake to all Israel on this side of the Jordan in the wilderness. And so he tells them, hey, God brought us up out of Egypt, and 12 spies went to the land, and only Joshua and Caleb wholly followed the Lord. And so we've been wandering through the wilderness for these last 40 years, but now you guys are a new generation, and you defeated Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings, and now here we are on the verge of going into the land of Canaan. And so there's some things that God instructed Moses to tell the people. And so he encouraged them to be obedient to God. And if they were obedient, God would bless them. So they entered into a covenant with God. If they would obey, they would be blessed. But if they would not obey God, then they would be cursed and they would experience judgment. So he says, ye shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it. Don't take anything away from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. And he says, behold, I taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land, whether ye go to possess it. So when you go into the land, you keep God's commandments. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. And he says, you need to teach them thy sons and teach your sons' sons, and declare unto you this covenant, to future generations. Teach your children and teach your children's children God's ways. And then he says, the Lord thy God is a consuming fire. So in other words, don't mess with God, even a jealous God. And that means that, God doesn't tolerate idolatry, that they were to be wholly devoted to him and not worship other gods. And he warns them, if you corrupt yourselves and you turn away from me and you worship false gods, he says in chapter 4, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, you shall soon utterly perish from off the land. The Lord will scatter you among the nations. And sad to say, that's what happened to Israel, right? God, they did corrupt themselves, and God did scatter them among the nations. And he brought a remnant back 70 years after the Babylonian captivity. But then they were in the land, and the Greeks conquered them, and then the Romans conquered them. They rebelled against the Romans. They were corrupt, and they were scattered among the nations. And then, later back in the 1940s, 1948, they became a nation again. But he says, if you're scattered from among the nations and you seek the Lord with all your heart, you will find him, for the Lord is merciful. And he says, thou shalt therefore keep his statutes and his commandments, that it may go well with thee. And there's a lesson for us that your life will be better if you obey God's commandments. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll always be easy, but God's way of living is much better than our way. And so he charges them. He says, hey, walk in all my ways, that it may be well with you. And so he says, these words which I command thee this day, this is in chapter 6, verse 6, shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And so he charges them. He says, hey, when you're in the land and you're blessed by God, remember that it's God who is the one who is blessing you. And he says, these nations that are around you, don't make a covenant with them. Don't show them mercy. Don't make marriages with them. Don't give your sons or your daughters to them in marriage, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. And so in Deuteronomy 7:9, it says, therefore the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. So God will be faithful to you. You be faithful to God. But notice he says, and God repayeth them that hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack to him that hateth him. He will repay him to his face. So if somebody wants to be a God hater, that's their choice, but the Lord will repay them to their face. God will judge them. And so he says, if you obey me, he says in chapter 7, verse 14, thou shalt be blessed above all people. And he describes the blessing that they will experience. And he warns them in chapter 8, when you have eaten and are full, then thou shalt bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he gave you. Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and build nice houses and dwell in, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, be careful that your heart's not lifted up. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, chapter 8, verse 18, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth. So when God blesses you, don't forget to thank him, and realize, God is the one who gives us power to get wealth. So we might think, hey, I have a lot because I worked hard. Well, that's true, but who gave you the ability or the opportunity to earn what you have? Well, it's God. Now he says in chapter 9, listen, you pass over Jordan this day to go in to possess nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities that are fenced up to heaven, in other words, high walls, a people great and tall, the children of the Anakims, whom thou knowest and of whom thou hast heard, saying, who can stand before the children of Anak? But he says, when I give you the land, don't say in your heart, For my righteousness, the Lord brought me in to possess this land. He says, but for the wickedness of these nations, the Lord doth drive them out from before thee. So when you go in and take the land, don't think, hey, it's because I'm so good that God's given me the land. No, it's because these nations were wicked. For the wickedness of these nations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Chapter 9, verse 5 says. So in the next, so Moses just reminds them, hey, you take heed and you love the Lord, be wholly devoted to him, lay up these words in your heart, teach them to your children and your children's children. And in chapter 11, verse 26, he says, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey, verse 27, but verse 28, and a curse if you will not obey. And so now the next section of the book gives various laws that God gave them to govern them while they were in the land. Different feast days, different laws of cleanness and uncleanness, and so forth. And so Deuteronomy, it's called, that means second law. It's sort of a repetition of the law, and it's to prepare the children of Israel as they go into the land of Canaan. So he reminds them, hey, you can have blessings or curses. You obey the Lord and he'll bless you. But you turn your back on God, you're going to experience the consequences, you and your children. So chapter 34 records the death of Moses. So obviously somebody else wrote chapter 34. Perhaps it was Joshua. So that's basically Deuteronomy, Moses' final words that he spoke to the children of Israel before his death in order to prepare them to go in to take and claim the land that God had promised to them. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us in our post program as we talk about a little bit in more detail the book of Deuteronomy. Thanks for being with us.
What wondrous love is this, oh my soul, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this, you approach the Lord of bliss, to bear